This is a collaboration between the CGCE and Nora. So I will turn it over to Nora to kind of talk about why we're here today.
Sure, great, happy to do that. So I came to the CGCE because I really felt like a lot of students on campus, even students who are in the SoAn major, aren't aware of all of the ways that our major can connect to things that you might want to do after Earlham. I think that there's some things that, maybe kind of come to mind right away, like social work, where it's like, it's in the name, it's like really clearly linked for students, but there's a lot of other things that people with training in sociology and anthropology do out there, both in government, in the private sector, and in the nonprofit world. And so, yeah, so the goal here was to kind of like open that up for students a little bit, talk a little bit about the things that you're getting in your classes that are really valuable, transferable skills that all kinds of organizations are interested in.
So my name is Eboni Stevens. I am a career coach in the CGCE.
And I'm Caroline Wagner, also a career coach in the CGCE. And before we get started to the learning goals, would it be okay for all of the student participants to add their email address in the chat, just so that we can then log it in Handshake as participants, and we can send you any resources that perhaps you have to leave and you miss out on, and then we'll log you for ourselves, but we can make sure that you get that. Thank you. You will also see as some sort of housekeeping, we'll call it, measures in the chat. There are a couple of links at the very top, or should be toward the, for new members, it may not have, right? When you join after, it may not have. So while you're adding your email addresses, I will add them, because I know if you join the chat after they've been added, you don't get to see them. So I'm going to give you a few links that we'll be talking about toward the end of the discussion today, but that way you have access to those, and I can always add those at another time too. Thank you for adding your email addresses. I appreciate that.
Okay. So I'll give you all a few minutes to do that. Moments, not minutes, moments. Time is of the essence. Okay, so I'm just going to get started while you're doing that. So we always like to go into these talks with, okay, what are you going to get out of this? Hopefully, we hope in this talk, in this info session, that you really understand a few key concepts, such as career and self-development, especially navigation of career opportunities and professional learning. But one thing that really we want you to take away from this is the critical thinking aspect of things, and how to take what you're doing at Earlham and understand how it works for you in the outside, in your communities outside of Earlham. So that context and that logical analysis of relevant information. And so talking about critical thinking and doing this, one way that you can do this is by prototyping. So
yes, so for those of you who haven't heard yet about this idea of prototyping or designing your life, so at Earlham, we have recently been creating materials and curricula around a book that was written by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, who are Stanford professors. They've written a book called Designing Your Life. And they talk about taking the approach of the design thinking model that they would use at the design school at Stanford to your life. And one of those steps is called prototyping. And just by being here, you are actually starting the prototyping process. So Dave and Bill talk about prototyping as a way about asking good questions, outing hidden biases or assumptions. So if you had an assumption about what a SoAn degree might get you and you weren't sure about the other things, you're in the right place, you're asking good questions, getting more data, iterating rapidly. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some new ideas that might spark some new interest for you. And then you can continue down that path by finding new opportunities to explore those, whether it's here on campus or through internship or research opportunities. And then creating momentum. So hopefully this will give you some momentum to get you thinking. Maybe you don't choose one of the things we talk about today, but at least it got kind of those creative juices thinking about all of the things that you could do with this really complex degree that you're working toward or potentially working toward. So we'll come back to more about prototyping toward the end, which will be kind of the opportunity to see some resources and what that could really look like for you. But generally speaking, prototyping, the authors break them into two categories. They break them into prototype conversations. So asking good questions of professionals or advisors. So that's kind of where this falls, right? But we'll talk about ways to seek out other opportunities to ask good questions about specific fields or careers. And then experiences. Perhaps after this, we can help you find a professional to shadow to gain more knowledge about what a day in the life of this professional is like, or perhaps a really short-term exploratory project, like a 1-week project. There's 3-month internships. So maybe you're ready for your summer epic advantage and you could use this, or a fellowship for, a certain amount of time if you're ready to graduate that might help you bridge the gap as you're starting to explore new career paths. And certainly if you still have time here on campus, engaging with a student organization, there are some that might be of interest depending on where you might fall within this breadth, this field. And then, of course, we're going to definitely talk about, and we'll have Nora speak to the classes, and the transferable skills will be a key component of this conversation as we move forward.
Caroline spoke very briefly about Epic Advantage and doing internships. We also have other pots of funding. I just wanted to put that out there. If you're not ready to use your Epic Advantage, we can certainly help you find an internship opportunity as well. So
So one quick question before we move entirely on is, what careers or fields do you think that you could enter into with a SoAn degree? If you want to write your answer in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share. So what kind of careers do you think are potentially available to you? Everyone's eating their lunch. Community organizing. Thank you.
Feel free to holler out if you want to too.
Research analyst. Yep. Someone's been doing their homework. Another second. Those are certainly a couple of them. We are going to talk in the next slide actually about some more opportunities. I know Nora spoke in the beginning about how certainly social work is part of that, but we'll talk about some more.
Yeah.
Teaching. Yep. Certainly, Meryl. There's
about to say we have in
who's doing that work right now, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we ready, Caroline?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. All right, so we pulled apart just some, and this is truly just a jumping off point in terms of the opportunities that are available to you. The SoAn degree, very much like a liberal arts degree and as a broader picture, prepares you for so many different fields, but the specific work, and we'll talk about those skills in a minute, that you do in SoAn are complementary to so many of these fields that we have here. So one that we wanted to pull apart that I've certainly heard students more recently have asked a lot about: urban planning. And so urban and regional planners are people that frequently work with the government, right, to develop land use plans and programs that help create communities. And so much of your work is about relationship building, communities, and research, right, which we'll talk about. And that's governmental. Then we move into a couple that could fall maybe in the private sector, that it potentially it could be in multiple different sectors, but a market research analyst, as one of our astute participants pointed out. So a market research analyst studies the market conditions and examines different sales of potential services and products, And a user design researcher uses some of that work that you do about understanding society and people to help bridge the gap with research and understand the end user, right? So in this example, we have the systematically study target users to collect and analyze data that will help inform product design. So it mirrors well, actually, with some of the designing your life categories, because that's a lot of, you have to understand the user in order to build something that will work for them. And we have, to that end, in EC Connect, Eboni and I were able to find a few professionals that are working in some of these fields that you maybe hadn't thought of before. And Ben graduated in '94 and is the Director of User Experience. Ben has a SoAn degree from Earlham and has gone on to complete other trainings, of course, and other experiences, certainly has other degrees. And you will find that with some of these, it will require that, right? But many of our degrees require different experiences, gaining more experiences, gaining other education to help bolster what we have. But if these are at all of interest, it's helpful to look and see what they have done. So if you like the idea of what Ben has done, going into EC Connect when we're done, kind of looking at Ben's experience, seeing if you could connect with Ben and find out more about how Ben got to where Ben is, using the SoAn degree as the foundation for his career. Some other career paths that we didn't necessarily highlight, but did want to bring your attention to, of course, is law, counseling, which we've kind of talked about, probably goes in tandem with the sociology or social work, human resources, understanding the community in which you're working with. DEI related roles are often a subset of human resources, but the multicultural work that you've been doing, community health positions, public relations and marketing, there is a place for that in terms of understanding how to communicate a specific message to society, a specific community within society. Then we have, of course, lobbyists and activists for a particular point of interest for yourself. I recently read there is a lobbying group actually for social work. I was reading about that recently. And then, of course, as was mentioned, Meryl mentioned, teaching professor and or educator, there's certainly those opportunities as well. Nora, is there anything you would want to add or anything that you would like to clarify?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's so many more things, but I think these are like some of the key things that we think about, a fair number of our alums going into. Yeah, I think.
Great. Thank you. So I think we're going to take it off to Eboni then, who's going to talk about salary potential, and then we'll get into transferable skills, where we'll lean into Nora's work in that department and be able to make those connections for you.
So we understand salary is an important factor for many. And so it's important for us to look at, the wide varieties of salaries that you could potentially be getting in any of these fields. I think it's important for you to understand, when you're looking at these fields, you can take two different approaches. You can go, completely with SoAn being in some of these professions, or like Caroline said, you can pair SoAn with another interest and kind of create the perfect scenario for you. Again, salary is something that is important when you're thinking about these fields and how to navigate things. And it's important to also understand that, as time goes on and times change, these salaries will change as well. And I think these figures are very indicative of the time that we are experiencing right now. For example, DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a hot topic right now. So right now, the top 10% of professionals in these roles are making somewhere around $230,000. And I say kind of indicative of the importance, because community health is something that is very important right now, as we are still understanding and feeling the effects of COVID-19. I know we hate talking about it, but I mean, it's community health is a role that is very important, and we're seeing that. So I may even venture out to say, I may be wrong, but this could possibly get this figure could possibly grow soon, as well as we see shifts in the workforce due to COVID-19 and things like that. But again, there are a wide variety of things that you can do, but understanding that it's about, okay, how do you take your interests and what you're learning in the classroom through a SoAn degree? How do you pair them to make the ideal situation for you? These statistics and figures were you obtain them from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a resource that's open to you, and also LinkedIn. So just to kind of getting you to think about, one of the factors that may be important to you as well. And then, so Jessenia wanted to talk about what are DE and I related roles, and can we talk about examples of this potentially? Jessenia, I think this is a great question. Let's talk about this towards the end. Is that okay? I can't.
Yes, that'd be perfect. Thank you, Ebony.
Okay. So if you have any questions while we're going through, just go ahead and put them in the chat. Also, just to take the pulse a little bit, if you got in a little bit later, please put your Earlham email in the chat for us. Thank you so much. So I will turn it over to Nora to talk about those transferable skills that we talked about pairing with your interests.
Right. So, we talked about the broad range of things that you could be doing with this degree. And we're going to talk a little bit about like the direct ways that the things you're learning in the classroom and in these co-curricular experiences can prepare you for those. So one of the things that you get from studying sociology and anthropology is, an understanding of a bunch of different forms of communication. So you are all learning how to write really, really well, not just in an academic paper style, but we do other kinds of writing as well. We do presentations. These are things that you can bring to any professional career, really. And just learning how to construct a logical argument and present it to someone, learning how to communicate about data. I think that's one of the biggest things that's really pretty specific to SoAn is, we have to talk about quantitative and qualitative data of different kinds. You learn really well what you can use to talk about different things, and you learn how to talk about those things to other people, what you can actually know. And that is something that all kinds of different organizations need. And so, that plays into things like market research, that plays into user design research. And those are two we'll probably talk about quite a bit. Those are things you could do in the private sector or in the nonprofit sector or in the government sector. And the difference between them is that, sort of very broadly, is that market researchers are looking at how to connect with markets to sell existing products, whereas user researchers are usually part of design teams that design products. And so, so both of those are going to be roles in which you'd be communicating about data that you're gathering, and using those research skills. I'll get back to that in a minute. Multicultural competence. So we actually talk about the diversity of ways of living in a really concrete way in your sociology and anthropology classes. You read about not just about different groups in different places, but how to think about why people are having totally different experiences and communicating about those differently and using concepts differently. So that gives you a kind of sensitivity to really being able to understand people, really being able to engage in that kind of deep listening that not everybody has. And those are things you can talk about to potential employers in all kinds of different roles. But in particular, of course, in those diversity, equity, and inclusion roles as well, which those exist in the nonprofit and in the for-profit and in the government world. As you said, sometimes under human resources, but sometimes in other realms as well. Okay, interpreting and disseminating data. I guess I talked about that a little bit. Right, in social research methods, a lot of you are learning you're going to learn how to read a regression table and how to talk about that. You are going to learn about how to look at survey data and what it actually means and how to talk about that. You learn how to conduct an interview and then how to talk about what results were from that, how to read a research paper. That's something you're learning in all different kinds of courses, how to talk about that. Research skills, actually being able to collect that data. You've learned all kinds of skills. There's all kinds of organizations that need people to interview people. People who do program evaluation. It might be on a much smaller scale than you would do if you're like a PhD researcher at a university or a big think tank. But all kinds of places need someone to just interview people who went through their program. And the skills that you learned about how to pose a question, how to build rapport, all those kinds of things are valuable. Ethnographic research, market researchers, user design researchers are using ethnographic research. So taking that ethnographic research practicum is a huge skill that you can show someone, that you learn how to just observe. Even that can be part of program evaluation too. One of my first jobs, like summer job I had, was to be part of a program evaluation of this parks program. And so it was literally just like sitting out in the park all day. I mean, there were fun things about it. Some days it was like kind of exhausting, but I had a little notebook and I had little things I had to check off about how many people use the park every day and all these things. And it was, it was fun. And I got to talk to people about how they were using the parks. And so like that, those were things that I learned through my ethnographic training, through my interview training, right? How to connect with people, how to do that, how to get people to take this little survey. That's hard stuff. Not everyone knows how to do that. You guys know how to do that, and you can talk to people about how you can do that, and it gets organizations information that they need about how well their programs are doing and how they can improve them. Statistical analysis, obviously, social research methods is huge for that. And I would say for those of you who are interested in some of these more research-oriented careers, it's a good idea to kind of double up, do a little bit more than just the basic requirements for the major. So I highly recommend for those of you who might be thinking the think tank world or market analysis, if you want to go the purely ethnographic route, you might still also want to take social research methods to kind of build out your understanding of different methodologies, to have a few more things you can list in terms of things you can do. For instance, in the ethnographic research practicum, you wouldn't necessarily have learned how to use qualitative data analysis software. Should you in mind, if you just take social research methods, you're not going to go as in depth into ethnographic observation. So pairing those could be a good track for someone who wants to go that quantitative route. It really can be a big plus in terms of opening some doors and getting to some of those higher salaries. Remember, all those careers have big ranges, right? And so I would really strongly suggest taking both social research methods and at least one course in statistics, and maybe doing a little bit more. Also, ArcGIS, if you want to go the urban planning route or some of those other kinds of market analysis routes, understanding how to use geographic information systems. That's what GIS stands for there. So understanding how to use a computer program to actually look at spatial data, spatially represent it, make maps, all those kinds of things. It's another way in which you're able to talk about data, able to disseminate data. It's another skill you can list on your resume that's really clearly identifiable to potential employers and very valuable. And I would say all of those things, if you get some more skills in statistics, if you get some more skills in ArcGIS, those are things that sociologists and sometimes anthropologists use. And so you can bring those into your senior thesis project as well. And then that's something else you can show later on. Hey, I know how to do this. It's going to be great if you're applying to a master's in urban planning. It's going to be great if you're applying to a entry-level market research job. Other things I should talk about with those transferable skills. Oh, one thing I will mention is that it's not too late to sign up for social research methods right now for this semester if you want to do that kind of adding on to those methods courses. So think about that. Ethnographic research practicum, something you can think about for next year. And there's always an introductory statistics course going. So always something you could think about adding on right now, so you can kind of start to build that out. And I guess the other thing I'll mention is that even in those topics level courses, we're doing all kinds of hands-on projects where you're getting skills. You can think about those and think about how to convey that to employers. And you're always building on those communication skills, but sometimes specific topic skills. So I frequently teach urban sociology. If you're thinking about the urban planning route, that's a great thing to take. If you are thinking about things in the health profession, lots of different kinds of social research happens in the health profession. And we have Victor Kumar's classes within the medical anthropology, within the medical humanities track that can help you really be able to connect to those kinds of career options.
My turn.
Nora, do you know? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Nora, do you know when urban sociology will be taught again, like in the next?
I haven't done it in a couple of years now, so that could potentially happen next year, especially if there's interest. So definitely let us know, and we can respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go to actually the activity that we had planned. But I also, like what Nora was saying, kind of really excited me. And so multicultural competence, I think that's one of, as a career coach, to me, that is really important. The others are very important too, but multicultural competence stands out to me right now as we talk about representation in many different fields. In the healthcare field, multicultural competence, when you're doing research of your markets and of the users that will be using your things, or your products that you're trying to create. These are all really, really important transferable skills that you are getting with a SoAn degree. So again, like I said, we're going to go into an activity now.
I'll put it back in the chat again too.
Thank you so much. If you don't mind accessing the link in the chat that Caroline just put in the chat. And so here it is. This is what it looks like. Here's where we want to really practice this critical thinking. And so what we're going to do is, in this link that we provided you, there are a few jobs. And so we want you to basically highlight what in these jobs correspond with the SoAn degree, or what transferable skills from the SoAn degree do you see coming in handy for each of these jobs. And so when you find those things, you can put it in what we call a Padlet, and in the appropriate column, you can add what you think those skills are that are important to the transferable skills that Nora talked about, that are important to the associate research analyst or senior research analyst or recruiting research analyst, all of those things, okay? So for example, this first one is really focusing on positively serving communities by focusing on topics like immigration, creating healthy and affordable housing, reforming law and criminal justice, and really making sure that children are treated equitably. So they list a few responsibilities: building support, build, support, and train organizing teams in faith institutions and community settings that are developing power, work regionally with staff, faith, and community leaders who are working on specific campaigns, participate in faith and actions, state and national policy campaigns, support volunteer organizing teams in outreach, research, and strategic planning, leading to large community action meetings at the local and countywide levels. And so what we want you to do is go to the Padlet and then start listing skills that you think would transfer quite nicely from SoAn into these professions. So we're going to give you, Caroline, what do you think, like 5 to 8 minutes to go ahead? You don't have to do all of them if we come to time. You can choose like one of them and go in and just take a stab at it. All right.
And I've started, and someone has joined me already with the community organizing as Eboni was speaking. You certainly don't have to put skill 1, 2, because 2 people could be adding at once. That was just the way I started. So, and you certainly do not have to include your name on this. But just thinking through, in that first one, we already heard parts of multicultural competence, clearly communicating, with various communities. We have components of research and outreach. So again, the interpreting and disseminating data so that communities can understand and make decisions about that. So we already have a lot of those skills that were mentioned. If there are some skills that you think you've taken in other SoAn courses that you bring to this that have not already been mentioned, by all means, integrate your background knowledge as well here. So if you've never used Padlet before, you simply click the plus and you can get kind of a post-it and hit publish. So we'll give you a few minutes. I'll be quiet now so that you can practice that.
All right, y'all. And I'll just keep the transferable skills here so you can like think about those while you're thinking about the job description. So we'll come back together and start talking again at 3:30. 8 plus 5 is 3:43. Again, if you should have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them towards the end.
So I'm going to log off so I can get to class at 1, but I just want to say thank you, Caroline, Nora, and Ebony. This has been great. I just really appreciate this. But yeah, hope the rest of it goes well.
Thanks, Micah.
Thanks, Micah.
Thanks for coming.
I see a lot of good responses in here. Very clearly understand the connection that Nora was talking about, that you can see in these research, in particular, research positions. I know Ebony gave us until 12:43, so we're closing in on that. Does anyone have any questions about these job descriptions and the kinds of skills that you're noticing?
All right. Yeah, I'm looking at the Padlet and I love the answers, especially the ethnography can tell killer stories. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, it's very clear that yeah, the connections are being made, which is great. Yeah, all the communication skills, and Nora shared about all the presentations you've been doing, interviewing, research, of course, statistical data collection. The last one talks specifically about, and I know Nora did too, the qualitative and quantitative in some of the courses you talk about. That last job description talks about it. The first one we kind of already touched on quite a bit, but there's research gathering, interpreting, and understanding social organizations and systems. So all of these skills can be used for these, but so many more. And as we go on to the last part of this, which is to kind of talk a little bit more about some resources. One thing that I know Ebony and I talk when we share with students and we're trying to understand the path they want to take is we do a little backwards design, which is something I use in creating curriculum too, right? You start with the end product and you kind of back your way up. And so if any of these job descriptions or others, as you're searching, look of interest to you, pull those up. You may not be ready to apply today, but let's look at what they are. And then let's back into it and try to see what classes you can be taking to get those skills. What kind of Epic Advantage or Richmond residency or some other funded research opportunity could you be doing so that you can fill in those areas of growth or just get more experience, as I know Nora was talking about. So that's really where we kind of segue into the last portion of our presentation today, which is to come back to the prototyping and what we can start doing now, aside from agreeing and being a participant today. There are some things that you could be doing as well. So we have some resources here for you, and we have a full breadth of people on the line, I know. So some of these may be more helpful than others, depending on where you are in your journey. But the first one we have, and Ebony is going to show as I talk through it, it's called What Can I Do with This Major? It's a subscription resource that we subscribe to, and you can find it in the heart. And she's showing you here on the screen. And then you go to Campus Life. And once you're there, you'll go to the center, kind of down where we have this Center for Global and Career Education. And we have a lot of different apps and things on there. And one of them is What Can I Do with This Major? Down before going global, or down below, I should say. And when you get here, this is a source that was created, I believe, at the University of Tennessee. Yes. And so there are majors on here that we may not have, but I can tell you that sociology and anthropology are both on here. Certainly not as together, but they are separate. So they can give you more examples than what we had before. In this particular resource, anthropology and archaeology are joined together. So you'll see some, if you choose to go that route, you'll see some examples that kind of veer away from some of the things we talked about today. Certainly, though, it's heavy on some of the museum studies aspects of things, which certainly with the anthropology components of a degree could be beneficial if you're interested in archives and things like that. But if whenever it loads for us again, we'll scroll down. We'll just briefly show you the kinds of things you can use in this resource, because it's helpful beyond just thinking about careers. So it provides an area, possible types of employers, examples of the field. And what I really like about these is it also gives you strategies. So if you're like, oh, that area looks most interesting to me, what kinds of experiences should I be looking for? So this resource gives you some suggestions. They're not, the end all be all certainly, but some good strategies to kind of gain that experience that Nora and we've been talking about. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but if you kind of liked that but wanted to hear more, this is a great place and tool for you to use. So it goes on for a while. It also, you can download it as a PDF if you want to hang on to it. And then down here at the bottom, there are other really fantastic resources, such as professional associations. Some might have a fee, but there are usually student fees too, or one, maybe there's ways to figure that out, but accessing their resources is often helpful because there's shared knowledge happening, there are shared job postings, internship opportunities. So even if you don't join those professional associations yet, just knowing they are there and they're a great resource. The Occupational Outlook, which is going to be probably very similar to some of the BLS information that Eboni shared on the salary page, but it's going to give you more, what is the Occupational Outlook? Like, will it be growing in the future? Will it not? And again, as Eboni said, some of that statistical data will change as we all evolve and change, of course. There are other helpful related resources and other kind of job opportunities links that should be specific to fields that might relate to someone interested in sociology in this example. So that's what can you do with this major. The other item is the integrated learning guide, which should open. I put it in the chat, but I will make sure that I add it again. It will, let's see, I'll find it again here. I made it so that you could copy. And it would make a copy for you so that it could live in your world. Okay, perfect. So what it is, it's going to be pretty broad. This is not specific to sociology, anthropology. This is about time here at Earlham where you have an opportunity to, there's suggestions about what kinds of things you should be looking at as you complete your EPIC journey. So if you're a first year student on this call, you can go back now and kind of explore, okay, well, I would like to go on an off-campus study. Maybe I should request an appointment with off-campus programs and find out how I can get more experience in sociology, anthropology while I am studying off campus, for example. And then the second page of this is really, there are text boxes so that you can kind of like make notes based on this. So that's why I made it a copy for you. And I'll put another link in the chat in case it's kind of gotten lost in the emails along the way. But this is a resource. It will probably be evolving into some web page things too, but it's a handout that we created in tandem with academic advising. So it has some pieces from both elements. Certainly, again, broadly speaking about your EPIC journey. Then the last component in the planning resources is, again, just Eboni mentioned BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics. They complete research on a regular basis about the market trends and things. So it can be another good resource. It's a dry website, but it's got good information. And then I want to transition us into, again, those conversations and experiences. So back to prototyping experiences. Nora spoke a lot about courses, and I know there was a question from Meryl that's been, I think we've had some answers about the courses that they can take. So Nora, do you want to speak again briefly, about the different courses? And I can kind of type as you speak, so it's in the chat for folks to see it visually.
Yeah, no problem. So some key ones are going to be the methods courses. So we have the Ethnographic Research Practicum, which is a year-long course that focuses on ethnography. As I was saying, a lot of market research firms, user design teams are adopting ethnographic methods right now. Corporations are always looking for what's going to give them an edge, right? Those kinds of observational studies can help them learn a lot in that area. Other kinds of research entities are using that as well. Social research methods covers other qualitative methods like interviewing and quantitative methods, survey methods, those sorts of things. So that's another great one. I would also suggest taking courses in statistics, starting with that introductory series in statistics, and ArcGIS. We have an introduction to ArcGIS course that kind of goes between different departments now sometimes. But
did I spell that right, Nora?
So it's ARC, no H, and then just GIS.
Okay. Oh, got it.
That's particularly useful for those of you who really any of the kinds of like academic research type roles, which can be, through the academic route or, in different kinds of think tank type institutions, but also anything in urban planning, government, those kinds of things. And then your topical courses are going to relate depending on the more specifics of what you might want to do, but then also just building those communication skills. And so urban sociology might be a good one for those of you who are thinking urban planning, and basically, a lot of Victor's courses for those thinking in the health fields. There's so many other different kinds of connections though.
Thank you. I'm going to type that in there just in case. I'm a visual learner, so if I can help out that way. Certainly, so a couple more things, and then we're going to have time to ask us questions, and we'll make sure that we get back to the question about DEI related roles too. Internships and research opportunities. Certainly use Eboni and I as resources, but one place you can start to look is Handshake. And I often tell students there is a lot in there, but what's beneficial about it is that companies become a part of it, knowing that colleges and universities have access to it, and alumni certainly, but that helps you know that they recognize who their audience is on one level. So, and it's not just Earlham, right? It's well beyond Earlham's campus. So it can have it can take a minute to weed through, but there are lots of places to find opportunity, and you can certainly schedule an appointment with any one of us to help with that. And to that end, Eboni and I are both on this call, partly because we're thinking about outcomes for students. So we're not major based at this point. So you may find that you are more interested in applying your sociology, anthropology degree in a business and maybe tech route, and then maybe potentially Eboni would be a better resource or sounding board for you. I am working with education, social justice, and public affairs. So I might be a better resource for someone who kind of feels that they're going to end in that field. But we can bounce ideas and we can help you make sure you get to the right person depending on what works best for you. The last thing under prototype experiences while you're physically here is to think about engaging with a student organization, which I think we mentioned before. There are lots of different organizations that you can do that with. You are already doing the conversations piece by talking with Nora, and certainly we'll open it up for questions. One thing that we haven't touched on as much as we mentioned, because there were little blips along the way, that EC Connect is a really great network of alumni and current students that you can tap right now. Our alumni end up in there because they have talked to alumni relations and they want to be involved in the network and to support students. So you can search by major, you can search by location, you can search by general interests, and there are ways to get into networks within that network for different career fields. And I will tell you, in my brief experience with reaching out to alumni, and I was actually reaching out about sociology back in the fall semester, they were very quick to want to support and provide help for our students. So it's a great place to reach out and learn more about these potential fields. And then we have Spilling the Tea coming up with, we'll hopefully have a panel of alumni joining us on Friday the 25th at 6 p.m. And there will be lunch or dinner provided for that. It'll be kind of a grab and go situation. And more information is being sent out about that. Thank you, Ebony, on cue, about that now, so that you can specifically talk to a professor, a lawyer, and someone who works in U.S. Department of Education and a nonprofit. So we're trying to get more, hear from the professionals itself. So this will be an extension of what we've done today.
People graduated from Earlham with SoAn degrees.
Yes, thank you, Ebony. Yeah.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad this is happening.
Good. I do want to make sure we get back to the DEI related roles and what that might look like. And then of course, any other questions you might have as we wrap up so you can get to class or get to sleep, whatever your afternoon has for you.
So Jessenia asked what DE&I roles there are. So you may have noticed I was on my phone like a few moments ago, but looking up just what types of roles you could have. So you can have diversity, equity, and inclusion roles anywhere from entry level, which is like DE&I interns, diversity assistants, diversity program assistants, and then you can go to individual contributor. You can be a consultant where, organization wants to know more how they can be inclusive. You can, that's it sounds more like contract work. You can do trainings and be a specialist or coordinator and partner with businesses. You can go to the level of manager of diversity or inclusion. Vice President of Diversity, it says underneath that, VP of DE&I, VP of Culture, Director of Culture, Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, Chief Diversity Officer, Head of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, things like that. So there are tiered levels to that job. You can open to your interpretation and what you think you can do and what, other people can think you can do, within the interviewing phase and all of that. So did I answer your question, Jessenia?
Yes, thank you, Ebony.
I could add on a few examples there. So sometimes those roles are like kind of project management roles or program management roles where like you say there's like a diversity program. Like, I mean, even on campus, there are people who say like manage the McNair program or manage the LIFT program, that kind of thing. So in the higher ed space, but those are in other education spaces, other kinds of organizations that have outreach programs might have somebody who kind of manages that program. So a lot of organizational skills there, but probably also some research skills, but also that multicultural competence skill, right, is going to be part of that. And then there are people there are even like boutique consulting firms that like offer up to organizations like, okay, we'll do some research on how you're doing on your diversity, or we'll come do a presentation on handling diversity in your organization, that kind of thing. And then there are people who are kind of like in some kind of organizational role who like oversee diversity outcomes, work with like multiple different groups in the organization. You'll see that in the business world. I mean, that kind of like chief diversity officer would be kind of that top level of that, but there might be like a team in a really large organization that just like works on overseeing those kinds of things. There are also diversity consultants in the creative fields. So I know someone who did SoAn with me in college, who now does diversity consulting for companies that make video games and board games.
Wow.
So that's kind of actually almost in a similar kind of role to like user design, but like he's someone who's brought in to, he specializes in certain regions, certain cultural groups, and he comes in to like kind of like actually like give the advice on, how sensitively they're dealing with different topics, how accurately they're depicting certain things, that kind of thing.
Adding on to that, like adding on to the creativity aspect, I don't see, like, it would be nothing for not nothing, but it would be something if you like, if you paired a SoAn, if you like double majored in SoAn and then theater and went on to be a dramaturg. For those of us here that aren't necessarily familiar with that area, dramaturgs and are people who kind of do the research behind the works of like movies and plays and things to make sure that things are like historically correct and things like that. So like I said in the beginning, we all have kids. I'm watching cartoons and I'm paying very close attention into the representation of what type of representation it is in the cartoons and things like that. So again, like we've touched upon before, it'd be awesome to see what Earlham students can do when they pair SoAn with these, unique, not unique fields, because theater isn't, I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but making these unique combinations of SoAn with another, like we've talked a lot about data, like double majoring in SoAn and data science, something like that I could see that going so far. So the possibilities are endless almost. Yeah. And then Meryl asked if we could possibly list courses where they could be accessible in the future. So I
can take the chat and make something that, yes, I can take what I typed into the chat and make it accessible elsewhere afterwards.
And I can send this this presentation to everyone as well. So Caroline, we can send those two things together to the students who were
perfect,
who participated. Yeah. Were there any more questions?
I've also got some resources on like specifically different kinds of organizations that are using ethnography and other kinds of like qualitative social science methods that I could
We put those together,
offer up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 1:03. If no one else has any questions.
Can I just say thank you so much, Eboni and Caroline? And I just want to impress on all of you how important it is to go to the CGCE early, start these conversations, and wherever you're at is a good time to be meeting with Eboni and Caroline and working on this and to be connecting with alums. I'm a sociologist. It is important who you know. I care about what you know too, but like, okay, realistically, social networks, we know they're really, really important. And one of the most important things you're actually getting out of your Earlham degree is that network. Small colleges are just like one big Greek organization, basically, in terms of the good parts of that. And those alums want to hear from you. They want to connect with you.
So again, ecconnect.com. You can find over 2,000 alums in a variety of fields. I think it may be even more than 2,000 now. So yeah, and again, like Nora said, Caroline and I, we meet everyone, and visiting the career education portion of the CGC is not just for seniors. The earlier you come, the more we can help you and the more we can like put our brains together and support you as a student.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And again, thank you to Nora for bringing this great idea and obviously your professionalism and know-how about this. You're the expert, so thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, this is great.
All right, bye.
Caroline, do you want to stay on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye, Nora.
This was awesome.
Woo!